Hey guys, 16-Bit Dad here, and welcome back once again to this RPG Retrospective. In this episode, we're looking at Wild Arms. Now, with Wild Arms, when you think JRPGs, you don't really think of westerns, like spaghetti westerns, the good, bad and the ugly, True Grit, that kind of thing. But with Wild Arms, that's exactly what you get. It is, well, not exactly. We'll get into that. It is predominantly a Western theme in terms of video, visuals and audio. You can see behind me the intro screen. It does really kind of mix the idea of JRPG tradition and Westerner, kind of spaghetti Western movies, but only in terms of the visual and the audio. The game itself is actually mostly a science fiction, sort of science fantasy game, where you're basically battling demons with guns and swords. So it's a bit of a strange mix, but the question is, does it really mix well, or does it kind of fall flat on its face? Let's take a look, shall we? So the plot basically revolves around three separate characters, each with their own starting storylines. Those characters specifically, if I can get my words right, are Rudy, Cecilia and Jack. Rudy is a dream chaser, so basically someone who effectively they're a kind of a drifter who just goes around trying to find and accomplish whatever their dream is. Cecilia is a priestess sort of character, and then Jack, I believe, is a treasure hunter of sorts. After coming together, after you play through their own individual backstories for getting into the game, they all kind of merge together into this one storyline where their main focus is stopping the demons from destroying the world of Filgaia, which is the world of Wild Arms. This involves various different kind of technology and magic, which doesn't really seem to fit the Western visual theme, but yet it works really well. They've done a really good job of mixing them together, and I don't understand. In my head, I can't figure out how you mix science fantasy along the lines of Star Wars level science fantasy with the Western themes and visuals and audio, mash them together and get a good product. It makes no sense in my head, but it happened. With that in mind, it's really important to say that whilst if you sit and you look at the front cover of Wild Arms, which I will put on screen now, it looks like you're going to be playing a Western. Like you're going to expect banditos, you're going to expect carriage attacks, you're going to expect something like an old school version of Red Dead Redemption, but you're not going to get it. Let's put that straight out. You're not going to get a Western in this game. Instead, what you're going to get is a JRPG, and what you'd expect from one. It's got everything from teleportation to giant robots at one point, and you even go up to a space station. I mean, it goes that crazy in terms of scope, but it all comes back down to this Western theme and audio and visual theme, which I think is incredible the way they've done it. The plot doesn't follow the visual and the audio theme, but it works so well. The actual plot itself, in terms of kind of grading it, I think it could be better. I'm not going to lie, it could be a lot better, but it's really enjoyable, and considering that they've only got the three actual main characters, you grow really attached to those characters. You really kind of want to help them proceed and help them succeed in their blight, their quest, whatever you want to call it. You become so attached to them that you really want to push forward for them. In terms of gameplay, it plays very much like a typical JRPG. You get your weapons from your merchants, you have quests and side quests to complete, you run around the map talking to NPCs and getting into random battles. It's a very typical JRPG foray. If you've played them before, if you've played a Final Fantasy, you've played a Dragon Quest, you've played a Breath of Fire, if you've played those, you know the basis of Wild Arms basically. However, it works really well because as you're running around the map, it is very typical old school 2D pixel art map but then when it flips over into battle, it does go into 3D. The 3D hasn't aged well, I'll be honest, at all. It does really show signs of the fact that it was a very early PS1 game, but suffice to say, it still works. It's still good enough to enjoy. It doesn't take away from the overall beauty of the game. Sadly, because of when it did come out, the 3D elements, they kind of came around at the time when people were still getting used to the PlayStation and used to making the jump to 3D. So they don't look outstanding in the slightest, but they're passable. I think that's the best way to play it. In terms of actual battle system, it is a standard turn-based battle system. There's no like alternate active time battle sort of thing like you get for the Final Fantasies. It is just you have a turn, enemy has a turn, you have a turn, they have a turn, and it just goes on like that. There's no kind of unique aspect to that. Where things really kind of stand out for Wild Arms compared to other RPGs really comes from the tool system that you get. Kind of like what you'd expect from Zelda, where to get past certain puzzles you have to use certain tools. However, in Wild Arms, each character gets their own tools. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but for example, Rudy gets bombs, which he can use to blow up the boulders and things, which actually plays a major part in his opening storyline as well. So every character, each of the three characters, not every character because there's only three, each of the three characters gets their own tool, which you need to switch between the different kind of lead characters for the party in order to use them for each kind of puzzle, really. So it works. It adds a nice little flavour, and it kind of makes it so you feel like each character is important. They're not just there for cannon fodder in the battle. When it comes to presentation for Wild Arms, I kind of already said about the whole 2D to 3D switch and how 3D doesn't really age well. It doesn't look good anymore. Whereas the 2D side of things, because it is a 2D pixel art, that kind of art is completely timeless. It will never look bad, so it still looks great for the time. It looks great now, and it will always look amazing. In terms of travelling, however, things get a bit weird because you can tell that they were still making the move across from obviously the 2D NES, SNES, Mega Drive kind of era over to the PlayStation, because they haven't quite got the 3D aspect down yet. So while you're moving around in 2D on the world map, when you get your airship, it switches into the Mode 7 view, and Mode 7 is basically where it does a sort of 2.5D view of the pixel world map. So it looks a bit jarring. I don't hate it, but I do feel like it didn't really. I've never really been a fan of Mode 7. It worked well on the SNES because that was all it could do, but the PlayStation can obviously handle full 3D, so it did look a bit odd to see it on the newer hardware. I think either going full 3D on the world map would have been better, but then considering the 3D graphics they have in the battle system, probably wouldn't have been good at the time. They do that in Wild Arms 2 though, and it looks brilliant. For this one, for Wild Arms 1, honestly, I think they should have stuck for a 2D view. If they'd just done, for example, what Final Fantasy IV, I think, did, where you just continue looking at the airship from above and you just travel around like that, I think that would have been a lot better for presentation. One thing where Wild Arms really does excel, and I mean completely excel, is the music. It has an absolutely beautiful soundtrack. I've already said it has the kind of spaghetti western theme comes into the game visually and in terms of audio. This is where it really, really comes into play. The music is outstanding. I could listen to it forever on repeat and still not get bored of it. They've done an amazing job. The composers obviously had a brilliant idea of what they wanted to do. They've taken ideas from the likes of the aforementioned Good, Bad and the Ugly and other such westerns, and they've turned it into a really, really nice, smooth yet powerful soundtrack, which kind of jumps around and twists around exactly where they need it to in the game. It also really pushes the PlayStation, especially for the time when the game came out, because you got to remember these are on CDs. They're not on DVDs. CD can only hold a few megabytes, can't even hold gigabytes. I think it's 700 megabytes, which is not a lot of data, especially when, for example, as I pointed out before, behind me you've got the intro video, which is a fully animated anime intro video. That's going to take up a lot of space as well. So to be able to have the whole game, plus that, plus the music, they've done a really good job of it. Presentation-wise, as I say, graphics, 2D graphics are beautiful, 3D graphics, not great. The Mode 7's a bit of an odd choice, but musically, it kicks ass. Like, really kicks ass. It's amazing, and I cannot say well done enough to the composers. It's brilliant. So I can't really say much about Wild Arms without giving too much away, because the story is kind of, it does have its twists and turns, and it's a really hard game to kind of sit in here and look at and try and work out what kind of rating you'd give it, because it's got some amazing points. The story's great, really enjoyable, really fun. The music, as I've kind of gone on about quite a bit, is phenomenal. The 2D graphics look stunning. It's really fun to play through. The tools are amazing. But the 3D battles really show their age. The Mode 7 shouldn't have been used, if I'm honest. It feels a bit slow at times. You feel a bit like things are dragging out, which doesn't take away from the story, but it does. You do kind of feel like it could have been a shorter game, which is a shame. But that said, it's an incredibly fun RPG. It spawned in my opinion, wonderful series of games that went all the way through to the PS2, and in fact there was a PSP game, and I think there's sadly mobile game coming out soon as well. I generally don't like mobile games, but overall I think it's definitely worth the time and money to play. There was a PS2 remake called Wild Arms. Words are hard. Wild Arms Code F, which is, as you can see, it's a horrible name to say, but they kind of fix a lot of the issues, and it's one of the best remakes of a game I've ever seen. If you get a chance, try and play the PS2 remake Code F. It's very pricey to get hold of because it's the most sought after version, but it is the better version, I will admit. And I'm not one to go for graphics over anything else. Graphics don't really bother me, but they fixed the jarring 3D. They fixed the Mode 7, and they're kind of the most. They're kind of the biggest negatives of Wild Arms with those two things, and they both get fixed. And it also makes a lot more additions to the game as well, which are actually good additions. So if you can, I would definitely play Code F. If not, playing Wild Arms for the PS1, you can't go wrong. It is a phenomenal game. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope it's going to spur you on to go and try out Wild Arms, because it needs as much love as it can get.